Today we're talking about civil conspiracy, a term many people have not heard. So, Dr. Evelyn, can you explain in simple terms what civil conspiracy is?
Yes, Melanie, I can. Civil conspiracy occurs when two or more people agree to act together to harm another person, whether that harm is emotional, financial, reputational, or legal.
So, why is this concept especially important for survivors of narcissistic or systemic abuse to understand?
I believe that it is extremely important because oftentimes this happens in family court when you have to go to court. I would say it's harder to prove when it happens in family court. And I can say myself, this is what I experienced. Was not aware of what it was called when it was happening. It took me many years to figure out what happened. I knew something was happening, but I didn't know what was happening.
I think in some ways it's probably the most sinister abuse that is used by narcissists, or they may not have narcissist personality disorder to be using it though. So, I want to make sure that people understand that it's just a form of emotional abuse that can be similar to gaslighting. But the problem is you've got many people who are converging on the lie, and they may not even know that's what they're doing, but it makes you feel like you're at fault, which is the whole point. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. And I must say, in my case, because I lived it, I know without a doubt that I believe that those actors in family court knew exactly what they were doing.
Right.
That's my opinion.
I agree with that. It's when I think sometimes when friends or family are, and I only bring this up because I think it's important to understand that sometimes people are being gaslit by the narcissist or the abuser. I'm going to use the term abuser because I don't want it to be just a narcissist personality disorder thing when it really can be used by others. But they're being gaslit into thinking that what they're being told is true about you. And then they join the side of the abuser and in the process begin having behavior towards the person being abused that the abuser wants them to have, and they don't realize that they're being used. And I think that's, both things happen, which is also why it's really important to raise awareness, because even if you're not the target of the abuse, people need to understand that this exists so they don't unknowingly become abusive just because they believe something that's not true. And we don't have to get into it, but my goodness, does the media do this to the public? I mean, it's just crazy the things that we're told, the lies that we're told sometimes. And then we get angry at the other side. And I can say this without revealing, it's happening on all sides of all political fences, really. And I think it's extremely important to understand it because it's such a very powerful tactic to use against someone. So how do abusers use other people or systems to carry out the abuse without appearing directly responsible? I wonder if you could give an example from your life, perhaps?
The domestic violence, my second footstool presented to everybody like they were perfect. And when I started talking about the abuse, nobody believed me because they got ahead of me. They had already painted a picture of themselves, and then they had cast doubt in other people's minds about me. So when I mentioned it, no one believed me. But now I've written a whole memoir, and no one has came to say that what I wrote down is not true, except for one individual that went on a smear campaign that had no idea what was going on for years because I shared nothing with them. I didn't want them to know. They have no evidence. No one has charged me with civil conspiracy. No one has came after me legally because everything is true. That's in the memoir.
That's where creating the documentation like a memoir really is a powerful defense. Usually they happen kind of at the end of a hardship, because in the middle of it, right, you probably wouldn't have been able to write that book until you'd kind of gotten through it and had a chance to see what was really going on. And that's why your book is so important. It really is a guide to help people who may be in the thick of it and don't understand what's happening to them, to be able to kind of recognize that what they're experiencing is abuse. And I wonder if you could talk about what it does to a survivor when multiple people are involved in discrediting, isolating, or silencing them, because it sounds like there is a lot of silencing that's happening from this abuse. It's probably one of the primary reasons for it.
I believe in a survivor is silent, and it's not fair because that has an impact on other survivors that may be going through the same thing. If they see this individual being attacked, then they may say, oh, well, I'm not going to say anything because look what's happening to them. The same thing is going to happen to me, but guess what? I am one of them people. You're not going to silence me. You are not going to bully me because I walked through the fire. I spent years finding what happened, not only to try to help myself, but try to help other people too, because whoever would have thought that this could even really happen, it can happen. And to me, it happened from a whole system.
Mm-hmm. How does gaslighting escalate when it's coming from a group instead of just one person?
I felt like it just made me so confused. It just traumatized me over and over and over. And a lot of times I felt embarrassed. I felt angry. I felt a lot of emotions because I couldn't get my story out. I had no one to speak for me. And I had to walk around with this picture, this false narrative that was painted about me. Not saying that I was perfect, but hey, if we're going to say something, let's tell the whole story. Not just half of the story.
Yeah. And I can imagine that when multiple people are involved in gaslighting you, it just makes it that much more powerful. Maybe if one person says it, you're like, yeah, I know you're wrong, but there's just something about, I think there's, and I should have done some research probably ahead of this show, but I know that there's been studies done where they create scenarios where they take one person is the actual one that doesn't know what's going on. Everybody else will choose the wrong answer. And then the one person it's obviously the wrong answer, but that one person often will choose the wrong answer because everybody else did. Well, that's the kind of pressure
they just allow with the other people because it's the norm. Yeah, that's what's happening in society. With these people that are trying to come forth about what's actually happening to them, and no one is believing them because of the status of the other person or the popularity of the other person or the own narrative that people have implanted in their own minds about these people that abuse other people.
Sadly, I think it's human nature that we don't want to be the odd one. And it does, which isn't to say everybody's like that, because that's why you're so important and you're so courageous. But by and large, people want to go with the flow. They want to go along to get along. We definitely saw this during some of the recent challenges that our country has faced, where we literally saw doctors who are experts in the field being silenced and removed from social media because they're not going with the narrative. And so other doctors don't speak up and they just go along with it because it's way too dangerous. And what a powerful tool to silence and abuse someone. Civil conspiracy, it's really important in the realm of domestic violence, which is what you're really speaking out about, in family court. But I just feel like it's important for everyone to know. And like I said at the start, most people have never even heard the term civil conspiracy.
This is rampant. This is throughout society.
Mm-hmm. It really
this happens to people throughout society. To me, it doesn't matter where you are. It can happen as long as you get a few people that align with one another and it's just you trying to say something that's happened and they're trying to convince you that it didn't happen. That's civil conspiracy.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of examples that can be made, but can you give some more examples as it relates to someone who may be abused by an ex? or a current spouse, who's in the throes of abuse. I'm just thinking about those who are watching or listening to this show that might be in the middle of it, but really can't clearly identify it. What are some of the red flags that will help them to know that is happening to them?
I would say when an individual is going out of their way to make themselves look perfect, they're already setting you up for the fall. That's possibly what's happening when they always try to make it look like you are the one with the problem,
Right.
knowing very well that it's them. And they get all these people to believe them. And there you are, you're trying to fight against a whole team of people that are convinced that you are the problem.
And I think, too, at the start of that, sometimes they convince you that they are perfect. You think that you're so, and this is some of the conversations that we've had and we'll have more of. You've been love bombed. You've been manipulated to think that person is perhaps your soulmate or just someone so amazing that your own psyche does not want to give up the dream and the fantasy that they created for you. So you're actually in agreement that they are as great as they are presenting themselves while pushing you down. So I think, too, that part of that is being able to recognize that if their actions and your perspective of them don't actually match. And that can be hard sometimes for people to really recognize. Have you been in that situation?
I would say that's being brainwashed. And I was brainwashed because I lost myself. All these things were happening, but I kept convincing myself, no, that's not what it is. That's not happening. All the while, yes, it was happening. And when I was in it, I could not recognize it. I had no way of figuring the stuff out until I stepped away from it, until I was put away from the marital home by the family court system, and I was able to look at it and see what was happening clearly. But while I was in it, I couldn't see it.
Yeah, that's really tough. Now, I know that you have talked about the importance of documentation and when you're being abused. How is documentation especially critical when civil conspiracy is involved? And do you have any ideas about how someone can document when sometimes just the larger amount of people who are all in agreement on something, even though it's totally wrong? How do you defend yourself against that?
When these things first happen, and we've given you a definition of what civil conspiracy is. When these acts first began to happen, write down documentation, write down names, write down what happened. Because if you wait a couple of days, maybe your mind may not even be able to go back and process it, because you're being traumatized at the same time. So it's very important when you notice that these things are happening to document this stuff.
That's really good. I can see that. And I think the process of journaling it, keep a journal where you document it, will help you see it too. So in a way, it's helping it to reveal it to you as well as to have that protection to be able to say, hey, this happened on this day and this person did this and none of this is true.
Date,
Just
time,
because everybody
place.
is saying it's true doesn't, and keeping a clear head.
That's right. Date, time, place, everything.
Yeah. How does understanding civil conspiracy help survivors reclaim clarity and self-trust? Did you get to a point where you felt more clear and trusted yourself? And what did it take to get there?
It was a long process because for a long time I didn't understand what happened. But as I kept praying, I kept sorting out things and asking God to help me, the picture became clearer as to what really happened in that situation concerning that marriage with the domestic violence. At first, I didn't know what it was. I was just left. I was flabbergasted.
I'm curious. I know in some of our past shows, you've talked a lot about the importance of therapy and how much it helped you. Did the therapist know about civil conspiracy? Was the therapy part of the process of being able to see it clearly? Do you feel that therapists are educated enough? I know that's a lot of questions I just asked you, but kind of it's all around the, the concept of therapy and how that works.
I am not sure. The therapist didn't really mention this to me at any time, but they knew that it was corruption involved. More than one therapist stated that there was corruption involved in the situation. They didn't go so far as to say civil conspiracy, because that's digging a little deep, but they knew that it was corruption involved in that family court case.
I'm just curious. I'm not asking you to answer this, but I'm just kind of expressing. I'd be interested to know how many therapists are really educated on this, because they should be. They absolutely should be. It's such a sinister and effective form of abuse. I think if anyone should be able to recognize it and help someone who's stuck in it, it should be a therapist. So hopefully,
I think so
if there's
too.
any therapists listening to this, please educate yourself and watch it.
Yes. You may have a client or a patient that may come in that's experiencing this, and
Yeah.
I hope that someone would want to help that person
Yeah.
and just try to understand that this is possibly what happened to you, so that that person won't be left wondering and just having a lot of unanswered questions, and that causes anxiety and other types of emotional distress.
Yeah, I think we both agree that it is really important for society to start naming and addressing civil conspiracy. And it's probably not happening as much as it should be, but thanks to your efforts and some others, hopefully this can start to come out at the forefront. We're almost out of time, but what final advice would you give to someone who feels like everyone has turned against them but knows something isn't right?
When that's a serious sign, when everyone turns against you, something has happened to convince those individuals that you are the bad person. And so there's a motive somewhere. Someone has a motive to paint a picture like that about you.
Kind of going back to the question about red flags, probably the biggest red flag is if everybody seems to be against you,
Yes.
it's not you, right? Like that's your cue. That's your
Yes.
clue that there's
I agree with that.
that's happening to you.